Welcome to the Wisdom Window on Strong Island Radio. The Wisdom Window is your portal to timeless knowledge and understanding. Join us each episode as Maddi Cheers and Marianne Franzese examine ancient and current wisdom traditions and apply these teachings to today's unique challenges. So let's get started and welcome your hosts, Maddi and Marianne.
Hello, and welcome to the Wisdom Window. I'm Maddi Cheers, and I'm here with my co-host, Marianne Franzese. Hi, Mare.
Hi, Maddi.
And today we are also with Paula Jennings, who's going to talk to us about the wisdom of transformation, bringing your soul into the here and now. So Paula is a self-described soul coach, but she's also a Kundalini yoga teacher and so many other things. She transformed her life once, at least once, right? From having been a Wall Street wizard to doing what she does now. So I'm going to turn it over to Paula to talk about how this all came to you.
Thank you, Maddi. Thank you, Mary.
So good to have you, Paula.
Oh, so good to be here. And I'm so glad that, I'm on my journey, that I'm surrounded by such wise women. I think it's such an apt name for your for your podcast because you both have brought me wisdom. And I guess my journey, I've had more than one transformation in my life. The most recent, I feel like I'm going through one right now. And I think even collectively, we're going through some form of transformation of our consciousness.
Yes.
And in some ways, I loved the imagery of the various stages of the butterfly as it went from the grub all the way through the various different stages of its cocoon into this place where it takes flight, right? And so that imagery and the concept of metamorphosis, that's really what I feel is happening. And I recognize throughout my life, there's been periods of metamorphosis where something happened. It could have been a good thing or a bad thing. It could have been, something happened that sparked an inner journey for me. So it sparked me to start to get curious and to start to look inwards for the answers as opposed to outwards, or to question my constant seeking from the outside, be it gratification through, in my early days, it would have been sex, drugs, rock and roll, and then later, it was other things, food, work. I certainly on Wall Street found myself there, in that dark place. And I think I was guided there to be a light in that place. And I also recognized there was a part of me that was hiding in that space, or at least was feeding an addiction or a need. And what is the need, right? What is that addiction? What is that need that we have? And what I've come to realize, it is a need to connect with the divine and also to feel like you are here on earth, like to feel that connection from heaven, from the earth to heaven. And so going upwards sometimes can be easy. And I was raised as a Catholic, and so I was raised to really revere the heavens and the masculine aspect of the heavens, and that sort of connection up to spirit. Which my mother was very spiritual, even though she was Catholic as well. And what I've always found harder is that deeper digging down into the earth and really feeling like I can give myself the security. It's the feminine part of the body, really, like the lower three chakras is this lower part, this emotional part that for so many eons has been denigrated and invalidated and told that it's not, valid. So I feel like certain points through my life, I've gone through that sort of crisis of who I am, trying to connect into what I know is valid emotions, feelings, sadness, all of it. And then also this ecstasy, bliss, feeling, that connection. And, I guess the conditioning tells you this is the one that you need to go for, this connection, this light, which is true. But also, you can't feel that light until you connect in with the parts of you that you may have disconnected from because they weren't accepted. For me as a child, there was parts of me that I split off because anger wasn't accepted. I had more red hair, and I was told to shut down my anger, my creativity. There's various different pieces. So the reason that I'm so fascinated with metamorphosis, and the reason that I wanted to create this program to support people as they go through, is that when you go into the cocoon, there truly is a dissolving that happens. And along my dissolutions with various different people, have had people who supported me. And so coming out the other side of some of those, from a humble place, whatever I can do to bring somebody else through that journey.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
You now can be the guide.
Right.
Because you actually have experienced what it means to really be liquidated, right?
Exactly.
That's what happens. You go into the imaginal.
Yes.
And from that goop, how can you possibly, how is there a butterfly there?
Right.
Right? How is that possible? But yet all the information of who you're supposed to be actually lives in that dissolved space.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
trusting that is impossible
Yeah.
when you're there, unless you do have a good guide.
Yes.
Unless there is someone who has been through it and can say, just stay put.
Yes.
Stay present. Be in the here and now, as you say.
Yeah.
And you will emerge as who your soul. And I guess that's a question for me, because we talk about this idea of a soul. What is your take
Right.
on the soul?
Okay. So for me, and I think this harkens back to my Celtic roots and this idea of the soul being the earthly part of us in some ways. So this, in Celtic tradition, we talk about the clay. The clay is what creates us. And so the soul is the part of us that transcends. I mean, I guess it lives in both spaces, but really it chooses to come and to incarnate. And it is there with you on your human journey. And it is that, that deep, dark, soulful place, that place that we go, think of jazz, think of blues music, or think of soul music, right?
Yes.
To me, it's almost like it represents too this feminine pleasure, this feminine principle that, again, I certainly find so hard to actually admit that I have or live in.
Right.
Because because I was raised with the mindset to be a good girl. I have the good girl programming very, very
so you cut
strongly.
off from the sensual, which is so much the way to experience love.
Yes.
Of all kinds, is through the senses.
Yes.
And that especially the intuitive place that lives so much in our senses.
Exactly.
And I think that is something that a lot of young women are looking for guidance with, is that here I am on earth here, and they are growing up in a time much more chaotic even than when we grew
Yes.
up. I mean, even though we grew up with Vietnam and all of that, this is a time, Marianne and I were just talking about, where you really have to be in the here and now, because the future is only here and now.
Exactly.
Nobody knows really what's going to happen. You can't really say that, tomorrow everything's going to be great. We'll just go back to the way we were, because so many people don't want to go back to that way. So we really are in that space of what I think of as a universal soul transformation here on earth. And especially young people need guidance with that. I mean, we've talked about this before on this show.
Yeah.
There's such an uptick in suicide, in cutting,
Yes.
in all these behaviors that you're familiar with, especially because of, I know that right now you're trying to get to work with middle school, high school people,
Yes,
so
yes.
that you can bring your work to them. So if you are working with young people, is there a process you take them through? Is there some exercise, or do you sit and listen for a long time?
So it's interesting. I have worked done most of my work not with older women to date,
yeah.
and so I have a program that I have created to support them, and I'm in the process with some friends, my friend Abby Kaleo and Jennifer Goldman, and we've been sitting down, and we are no way there in terms of knowing what to do, but there's some principles. Well, first of all, we feel very passionate about the fact that if we could go back and speak to our 18 or 16 or 15-year-olds, there's so much wisdom that we can impart on them that may have changed the course of how they navigated their life, right? Because it wasn't available, and I think it really takes one voice in your life sometimes to really, like, along the way, there's been people that I can look to, like my friend Sarah's mother, Anne, and I used to go to her house every day. She was this woman who she was the validation in my life. Like it really, and so when you've got one person in your life, especially as a young person, who sees you, doesn't try to change you, doesn't make you wrong for your behavior, doesn't, just fully accepts you exactly how you are, and actually shows you that in some way, I think it really does change the course. So we're in process, and we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from your listeners as well. Like, what are young people? We know from our own experience and the girls in our lives, and also our younger girls. We've all each had a different journey with it. We know. And we see and we read the stats about the suicide and all of these things. And what we're sitting with right now is, what would a program look like? What would it look like to take these girls through a journey of, a space where they would feel validated, they would feel like their creative expression was encouraged, they would feel like, what form does that take? We've been through 2 or 3 iterations already. We've wiped the board clean, and we started again. We just spoke last night, actually, and one of the things we talked about, there's a lot to consider. How do you reach the girls? For me, I feel like I want to bring, and this is my personal thing, but I want to bring this deeper sense of spirituality and depth to the conversation, because I believe that until you know yourself deeply, until you take that journey and to get to know who you are and recognize that you don't actually need anybody outside of you, that until you reach that place, you're always going to, there's always going to be, and maybe this is a whole life journey, of course it is, but I really want to bring in that connection to the divine, because for me, that was really what soothed me and what kept me going, right? To know that there was something bigger than me and connected me beyond the suffering that I was feeling in the moment. Of course, a lot of us, Jen and myself and Abby, both have got we all have Kundalini Yoga teacher training, but we also have other skills. For me, the breath work, the just small practices that are done and consistently that will help open up themselves to recognize the divinity, if you like. I say divinity of who they are. And also a place where they can be themselves, and so that they don't feel like they have to put on a mask. Because I think that's the other thing that happens. Our masks get so exhausting and so heavy. And by the time I was 50, I had 5 million masks. I mean, there was more than one mask that was in operation. And so maybe it really is creating a new paradigm shift. And it's not fighting anything that we have that exists right now. I think it's actually those who are willing to say, okay, how do we vision what the future looks like? How do we vision a world that maybe we are just about starting to imagine, right? And a world where everybody is recognized for their gifts, a world where they're not valued by the work that they do, but actually the gifts that they have to share. a world where you're loved for who you are and you can give love freely. A world where you feel safe and secure in who you are and being who you are. Like it is like, you know, and some people will say you're being Pollyanna, but I think we have to, I think Eleanor Roosevelt said something about our future the future is built on the dreams that we believe. Right? So we have to believe that there's a bigger future. And I think that's why also this will take time because we're also getting out of our own heads. This is not an intellectual exercise.
No, and it's actually a very beautiful offering because there is a sense of, as an older woman who has naturally been through some initiations of womanhood, maybe not called that, but still an initiation, there's an availability.
Yes.
To be present in having survived certain stages of womanhood. And I have 3 daughters, and I was sitting with my girls, and we got onto the conversation about hymens and the loss of your hymen with the loss of virginity. And they started teaching me just about the vagina in ways that I was like, we need vagina stories, right? There was vagina monologues, which was more about the trauma so many of us face because we have vaginas, right? But the actual education, and I sat there learning from them, and it put this idea in my mind of there needs to be a sharing of this biology, and it goes back to what you started with, Paula. We want to be ethereal about what it means to be a woman, but we have a body and we get our period, and and we are the ones who are responsible for birth control, and what does that do to our bodies? And then what is this, the function of who we are biologically, and what are the stories that go with that? The stories of shame or triumph or victory or sadness, whatever it might be.
Yeah, exactly.
And to share it intergenerationally.
Yes. See, that's the thing. That's as you both know. And as my listeners may know, our listeners may know, sorry, but as they may know, for me, I am especially interested in the intergenerational wisdom because what we know from being women is that there is wisdom spoken by 5-year-olds, and I think because we are, and I'm not saying this to put down men, but men have a different, whether you want to call it divine direction or you want to call it psychological direction, men have a different direction and instruction in the way they are in the world. Yes. So yes, of course they love their children, they want to protect their children, they want to provide for their children, but often because of their concern for where their children will be in the future, they are not the ones that are demonstrating the unconditional love. And when you're talking about the problem of failure, I remember once reading about how, this is like many years ago when I was like taking a psychology course. And they said that women are more afraid of success and men are more afraid of failure. And I think that might even still hold true in some quarters today. I think women are less afraid of success now, having been through, the women's liberation movement and everything else that's come along in the last, 50, 60 years. But I do think that men haven't been allowed to go through that in the way we have, or they haven't discovered it yet. I'm willing to allow them. I'm not sure the culture is. Yeah. So they are much more afraid of failure. Yeah. They are much less accepting if a child wants to go off in a different what looks like a weird direction. Yes. They're much more worried that, are they going to make a living? Are they going to be able to survive? They're going to be living with me the rest of their life? What is this? So I think that this idea also leads into being able to teach our children that failure is not a failure. You know, Marianne and I were just talking about this. You make a mistake, you move on, and you have to recognize, like, you don't throw good money after bad, as the saying goes. You don't go down the rabbit hole further and further. You say, "Yay, I tried it." And it
Yes.
didn't work. Okay,
On
so
to what's next.
what's next? You know, and while it is a short life, it is also a long life. You know,
Yes.
you've got, most of us are going to be here for 80 years, which I know to, you know, many people seems like we have to be here much longer. But you really, to give this gift, if you start from day one, recognizing the gift of a human being and where they are in the world, then it's a long time. It's a good long time, and you get that idea that, oh, I can switch it off and on. And I had given Marianne the example of my dad. My dad tried many, many things in his lifetime. He had at least 3 businesses he tried, failed. And I mean, he always had his job with, I mean, he was a genius. You know, we got him that shirt that says, "Yes, in fact, I am a rocket scientist." You know, so he worked on the moonshot. He did all these things with the government, but at the same time, he was also trying different things. And he was one of those people, maybe because he had a fallback position, maybe because he was a genius. But I always had the example in my life of somebody who tried something, failed at it, moved on. And I've been very good at doing that in my life. Partly, I believe you're born into the world with those kinds of gifts. Partly, you're looking at the example of the adults around you.
Sure.
So if we become that example for the next generations and say, "Go, try it."
Yes.
And we're here to catch you if you fall.
Yeah.
You know, we're not expecting you to fail, but if you do, we still love you.
That's right.
And we're
Right.
not criticizing you. We're not condemning you or judging you.
It's not even a failure in the way that you're describing the journey, Paula, which is right. We're called to certain places. Like when you were
Yeah.
talking about Wall Street, and you said maybe I was called to be a light in that void, or maybe I was hiding there. Right. So this pull towards making meaning out of the
Yes.
experience then becomes part of something bigger
Right.
than just what the conditioning tells us is success, right? Maddi, is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, I think there's so much in what you both said. Maddi, just around, I can identify so much with even with my own family situation, with how my ex-husband deals with the kids' so-called failure and how I do. And sometimes I feel we're poles apart. And thank God, I think maybe in the middle there's a sweet spot that they benefit from.
Right.
And I recognize he's not wrong. He's got this other, I guess, conditioning, right? His conditioning is to succeed, to be, ours was different. And I think specifically for me too, being Irish and living in a country that really didn't have divorce, contraception, the woman's place is in the home. It's written in the Constitution. My mother had to give up her job when she got married. So, I feel like I can't. One of the reasons I probably chose to come here to the United States was that for me it was a lot more evolved in terms of the personal freedom that I could have as a woman.
Right.
And what did I choose to do? I actually chose to go to Wall Street amongst men, and I think there was something in that too, because I was raised to be to really think that the male were superior, and I think I was a man for 25 years in some ways, right?
Yes,
In
you
an
had to
environment.
fit into that.
I had to fit into
Right.
that, and that was valid for me because of my conditioning that men were the better species, or that men were, like that men had
Superiority,
were
right,
superior,
supreme, right.
And then I've done a lot of reading, back to what you said about virginity and the hymen and all of the things that we don't know. I've done a lot of reading on, Celtic goddesses or ancient goddesses, and how, for example, in Ireland, the queen had the honor of having sex with many men to see which one of them qualified to be the king. That was the queen's role. And this idea of a woman not having pleasure
Yes.
was not even considered,
Wow.
And in fact, we're the one species that has something that is designed for pleasure, like our
Yes.
clitoris, right? That,
Yes.
that no other animal or being has. And so I think we've been so cut off from that sensual that it has, it has created suffering for us.
Absolutely.
Right. It's created suffering, it's created misunderstanding.
Yes.
And that is where I really think that forgiveness comes in.
Yes.
That part of this work that we want to do with especially middle school and high school age kids has to do with forgiving yourself for not living up to the expectations of your parent or the culture or and I think that even though some young people don't recognize that this is a fabulous time to be young. This is a fantastic time to be young because a lot of the expectations are breaking down, but we as the elders can't let it break down into nothing. Like, it's great that a lot of these expectations are breaking down, but it can't just be a desert out there. It can't be the
Well,
the
I
collapse.
love that as a starting point to even ask girls, what do you need to forgive us for? As the older generation,
Right.
who has somewhat misled you,
Yep.
or has tried to impose a certain
Right.
belief system that doesn't really work, and we
Right.
didn't really question. And can we, in fact, begin with our apology?
Right.
And that is very powerful, and it softens. It then softens a defense of, because you're older, doesn't mean that we necessarily know better.
Right. Right.
But we certainly have lived and been through enough, and hopefully have gained enough confidence
Yeah.
to hold the young person's anger,
Right.
the young person's disappointment, and be able to create that kind of relationship.
Yes, and I think when we go back and talk about what it meant for us to be young when we
Yes.
were your
Yes.
age, and we had the same disappointments with the older generation, we had the same disappointment. We were the counterculture.
Right.
And they're the counterculture now. So if we can sit, this is why this is so important to us here on the show and as individual women, if we can sit and say, well, what does it mean to be counterculture today? And where does it line up with what it meant to us, 40, 50 years ago? And that discussion alone can bring us to understanding and can bring us to a place where we can take the goop of all of that and create the butterfly.
Yeah.
That I think is what we're going for here. It's what you're going through in your work. It's what we're going for with the Women's Oneness Project. It's what anybody who is involved with the concept of oneness and the concept of unity, a realistic concept. I think I was reading something a couple of days ago about why people don't want to talk about unity, and that's because the way we're couching it, the way we're describing it, has to do with follow these rules. Yeah, we can be unified if you follow my rules.
Right.
No, we can be unified if we follow my rules. That's not unity. I heard this great quote recently by Martin Luther King, where he said, a real leader does not seek consensus. They mold consensus. And I think that's what we're talking about here between the generations. So that brings us to the end of our show. I know that went fast. We're going to have you come back again.
Thank you.
Paula, before we go, please give us your contact information so that everybody out there listening knows how to get a hold of you and Abby and Jen.
Okay, thank you. So my contact info, my website is paulajennings.com. And on Instagram, I'm Paula Jennings 108. And the nonprofit piece, you can contact me about it. Right now, it's not. We don't have a lot. We're literally in process. So, can contact me or Abby Kaleo. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from young girls. And I love your invitation, Marianne, about the apology. I think that that's absolutely
Yep.
a huge invitation. And thank you for bringing that to the space. And thank you all for listening.
Oh, it's so nice to have you today.
Really, thank
Truly.
you, thank you. So tune back in, leave questions, leave comments. We'll be back next week with another podcast. Not that I know what it is, but it's a surprise. Surprises are good. So
The wisdom of surprise.
the wisdom of surprises. That's next week. And as always, you can contact us. You can join the Facebook group, Women's Oneness Project. It's a public group. And especially if you're a woman, we'll approve you. And I do not say that as a cut to men. Sadly, we've had some situations where men have joined and have not followed the mission statement as it is. So we do ask ladies, women, whatever you like to be called out there, if you have friends who are guys that would like to be part of the Women's Oneness Project, please, after you join, just jot us. This is my friend Alex who wants to join. Please let him in when he requests, because we do have several men in the program. And again, you can always send us comments at Maddi, Maddi, stop there, at womensoneness.com. Marianne, you want to give any contact?
I
You're
think
good?
that's great. The
Okay.
Women's Oneness.
Wonderful. So we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. As always, it's been a pleasure.